The person who touched his car wasn't a thief, but the only one who could save it. Imani Carter stopped in her tracks. The Ferrari SF90 sat on Oak Street, gleaming like no one was allowed near it. She looked at the hood, gently placed her hand on the blazing red paint. At that exact moment, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" A man's voice sliced through the air. Sharp, cold. Julian Westwood approached, black suit, warning in his eyes. Imani looked up, didn't flinch. The crowd paused. Someone raised a phone to film. Julian raised his voice. "Get away from my car." She didn't move. "The electrical system's short-circuiting. If you don't fix it, it'll catch fire." He froze, said nothing. The camera kept rolling. The crowd kept watching, and Imani, she only took a single step back, eyes unshaken. Have you ever been dismissed just because you're a woman, black, or not dressed the part? Watch the full story. You might see yourself in it. The video was only 12 seconds long. Imani touched the car. Julian yelled. She replied, calm, clear, then walked away. That was all. But it split the internet in half. One side raged. Touching someone else's property is wrong, no matter your skin color. The other, even louder. If she were a white man in a suit, would he have reacted the same? Comments flooded in by the minute. Clips got trimmed, filtered, reposted. TikTok, Reddit, YouTube Shorts. Julian Westwood shot up the search rankings. In his high-rise office, he watched the screen. Replayed it. Again and again. Face unreadable. His assistant asked softly, "Should I loop in PR?" Julian turned off the video. "No need. This'll blow over." Outside, the hashtag #TheWomanWithTheWrench was picking up steam. Imani had no idea. But the internet had already chosen a side. Penthouse, 47th floor, floor-to-ceiling glass. The city below looked like a model. Julian stood before a massive screen. A video call in progress. A $30 million acquisition deal for a London startup. He nodded, signed. No hesitation. The partner smiled, said something about long-term vision. Julian cut in, "I'm buying people, not visions." Silence on the line. The call ended. He turned away. In the corner, an old wooden cabinet. On top, a photo of his father. Dark-skinned, curly hair, grease-stained overalls, etched into the frame. "Legacy is the courage to be just." Julian stared at it, said nothing, set his whiskey glass down. A part of him was still alive, but locked away, and had been for a long time. The clink of a wrench on metal, a steady rhythm. Imani lay on her side beneath a car, cap pushed back, earbuds playing vintage jazz. Billie Holiday whispering through the hum of engine grease. She worked on a stubborn bolt. No sighs, no grumbling. Just pulled back, adjusted position, and kept going. Tasha, a coworker, handed her a bottle of water. "You seen the news? You're going viral. Ferrari, CEO, you're a whole headline." Imani shrugged, said nothing. A moment later, she spoke. "MIT once gave me a scholarship. Then they revoked it." Tasha blinked. "Wait, what?" Imani mumbled, eyes fixed on the wires. "They said I didn't fit the image the school wanted for their media campaign." She said it like old news, but in her voice there was a fracture that had never healed. Julian sat behind a walnut desk signing a deal with a Korean investment fund. Tie crisp. Assistant nodding beside him. At the same time, Imani knelt under an old Camaro. Sweat traced her temple. Hands slick with oil, still tightening a bolt. Julian raised his glass in celebration. The investor on screen praised sustainable value. Imani gripped a thin cloth, wiped her hands, then stood to call the customer over. Julian smiled, nodded politely. Imani stretched, brow furrowed from the strain. 2 people, 2 rooms. One respected for his silence, one forced to prove herself, every second, every move. The world measured them by different standards, though both were working, and both knew exactly what they were doing. The warning beep sounded for the 3rd time in the driver's seat. Julian frowned. Engine light blinking. He called the top garage in the city. One demand: send the best. 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. Julian opened it. Standing there, Imani Carter, blue coveralls, hair in a bun, familiar toolbox in hand. They paused. No greeting. Julian stepped back. "I don't need you." Imani didn't flinch. "I don't need you to need me, I just need the car fixed." His assistant cleared his throat. "They said she's the only one certified for this new hybrid system." Julian bit his lip, annoyed, but nodded. Imani walked in, didn't look back. Their second meeting, again over a car, but this time no crowd, just the necessity of trust. The garage was stone-tiled, sleek, and cold. The Ferrari sat in the center like a broken jewel. Imani popped the rear hood. No questions, no waiting. Julian crossed his arms, watching from behind. You don't need to remove that part. The issue's in the main wiring. Imani didn't turn. I know what I'm doing. He stepped closer. I want full transparency. Report every step. She looked up, eyes steady. I fix cars. I don't perform. Silence. No one backed down. A tool clicked into a metal tray. Imani bent down again. Julian stepped back, but didn't leave. The room stretched with tension. Two strong minds, saying little, yet shaking the air. Not even 2 minutes later, Imani paused. She wiped grease from her sleeve, stood. The issue isn't electrical. Julian frowned. She pointed to the front right brake pad. It's installed backwards, constant heat contact. If you accelerate suddenly, the disc could explode. He didn't believe her. Stepped over, opened the touchscreen panel, checked, compared specs. Imani stayed still. No rush, no more words. A moment passed. Julian closed the screen. Didn't say, "You're right." Just looked at her a few seconds longer. Imani returned to work, unfazed, as if the moment wasn't worth stopping for. But in Julian's eyes something had shifted. Not by debate, but by a brake that nearly failed. Julian quietly watched as Imani adjusted the rear tire. The silence softened. He finally spoke, voice low. When I was a kid, I thought my dad loved cars more than he loved my mom. Imani turned slightly, didn't smile, waited. He died when I was 17. His last words were, "Don't ever let your feelings weaken your logic." Imani set the socket wrench down. Sounds like someone who'd been hurt, more than just cold. She sat beside the car, cloth in hand. When I was little, every time I got sad, my dad brought me into the garage. He'd say, "Anything can be fixed if you're willing to take it apart and look closely." A pause. Their memories didn't match, but both left scars in places hard to name. Imani was checking the electrical connections when Julian asked softly, "What did you study before you chose to fix cars?" She didn't look up, just said quietly, "Electronics engineering. I got a scholarship to MIT." His brow lifted. He couldn't hide the surprise. Then it got revoked. A pause. No clear reason, but the scholarship rep once told me, "You have the talent, but you don't represent the image our school wants for this year's global campaign." Julian looked at her, said nothing. For the first time, he didn't just see her as capable. He saw that she had been excluded, because of exactly what made her different. Imani gave a small, joyless smile. After that, I chose mechanics. At least here, no one asks if I fit the image. Have you ever been sidelined, just because you didn't fit what they expected? If so, share your story. Voices like yours deserve to be heard. The engine bay was wide open. Wires, rotors, and polished mechanical parts gleamed under sterile white lights. No one spoke. Imani adjusted the pulse calibrator. Julian held the opposite side, his hand close to hers. Soft jazz played in the background, wordless, smooth, with a trace of ache. She leaned in. He stepped slightly aside. The gesture was small, but not awkward. Julian watched every movement. His gaze lingered when she furrowed her brow to fine-tune the settings. Imani didn't look back, but somehow she seemed to know and didn't pull away. The gauge spun. Wires lit up. The engine came back to life, but neither of them rushed to check it. They stood there, hands still touched by grease. No words. But the distance had shifted. Between the jazz and the soft engine hum, something had begun. Slow, but real. Imani closed the toolbox, her sleeves still smudged with oil. Julian stood beside the car, watching her for a few seconds before asking, "Do you want to drive it back to the garage yourself?" She froze. A simple question, but in her world it was nearly unheard of. She looked up, eyes slightly widened. "Are you serious?" Julian nodded, handed her the keys. No hesitation, no conditions. She took them, with both hands, nodded quietly. No smile, but her eyes shimmered. For the first time someone handed her what others always clutched tightly, with trust, not suspicion. Imani climbed into the car, fingers wrapped around the steering wheel. It felt foreign, like gripping a piece of a world that never included her. The car rolled forward. Smooth, exact, In the middle of the crowded street, she was the one driving. And this time, no one stopped her. Imani tightened her grip on the wheel. Streetlights blurred across the windshield. The city ran backward in her eyes. Jazz still played on the radio. No lyrics, just a lone saxophone, soft and low. Wind slipped through the cracked window, the scent of new leather mixing with old memories. Cut to a 16-year-old girl, soaked hair, wrench in hand, bent beneath an old pickup. Rain poured. Mud splashed her jeans. A flashlight strapped to her forehead with rubber bands. Inside the house, her mother coughed in bursts. Imani tightened the bolts. Rain slid down her spine. Back to the present. She drove across a steel bridge. Hair lifted slightly in the wind. Eyes fixed on the road. But her heart wasn't there. Some people learn skills out of passion. She learned them to survive and to keep others alive. The Ferrari glided through the night, but to her, every rotation of the wheels carried a memory that hadn't dried yet. Julian sat alone in his office. No lights on, just the glow of a screen. He opened a drawer, pulled out an old photograph. 2 people in the photo, him, nearly a decade younger, and a black woman. Bright eyes, tilted smile. Their hands touched, but it was their eyes that held. A voice echoed in his mind. If you want to keep your position, you'd better cut things off with her. Julian ran a finger along the edge of the photo. The corner was worn. He'd hidden it well, but never thrown it away. His eyes lingered on the woman's face. No more anger, just a quiet sadness at the corner of his lips. Some choices feel like survival. Only later do we realize they're the fastest way to lose ourselves. Imani sat on the garage steps, sipping water. Julian leaned against a pillar behind her, just a few steps apart, but neither moved. He spoke first, voice low and rough. I once made the wrong choice, out of fear, and I don't want to repeat it. Imani didn't look at him, just rolled the water bottle in her hands. You're still afraid. Julian fell silent. She looked up, not angry, but direct. Don't speak if you're still afraid to choose. No comfort, no forced smile. Her words weren't loud, but they landed exactly where his guard was weakest. Julian exhaled, didn't argue. Sometimes people don't need to shout to cause hurt. They just need to speak the truth you haven't faced. Imani rested her elbow on her knee, gaze drifting to the street. One time, I was driving a client's sports car back to the shop, stopped at a red light, and 3 police cars boxed me in. Julian turned to her, frowning slightly. They ordered me out, hands on the hood. She paused, took a breath. I said I was an engineer. They laughed. One said, "You think I've never seen someone steal a car like this?" Julian's jaw tightened. He said nothing. I had to video call the client. The moment I took the car, only then did they let me go. The breeze moved softly through the yard. She didn't tell it like a complaint. She told it like something that happened, too often. Julian stared at her for a long time. No apology. Just for the first time, he didn't know what to say, and that silence made him feel small. Imani was bent beneath the hood. Julian stood nearby, holding the screwdriver she'd asked for. A brief hesitation before handing it over. She held out her hand without looking. He placed it in her palm. Fingers brushed, just for a moment. She looked up. Eyes met. Didn't flinch. In that gaze, there wasn't romance, but there was no more distance either. Julian opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Imani looked at him for a long second, then turned back, said nothing more. Her hand still gripped the tool, but her expression had shifted, just slightly. Something had touched her, but hadn't been allowed to stay. The wind slipped through the open door. The room remained warm. But that look, they both felt it shift the rhythm of the air. Julian set a cup of coffee beside Imani. She was writing on a clipboard. Didn't look up. He spoke softly, almost testing the idea. I was thinking, what if we started a mobile service for luxury car repair? Imani looked at him. He continued, not just fixing cars, but training young engineers, especially those who don't get the chance. A beat of silence. Would you want to do it with me? Imani set the pen down, eyes steady on his. Sounds like a good idea, but are you sure this is about the project, or feelings you haven't named yet? Julian flinched slightly, didn't argue, just fell quiet, like even he wasn't sure where the line was. She didn't push, didn't pull. She just let the question stay, between them. No decision yet, but a dream had been placed on the table, waiting for someone to say yes. A Lamborghini Huracan sat by the curb, heat rising faintly from its rear engine. Imani crouched beside it. Fingers moved over the thermal system, eyes sharp. Julian stood nearby, watching, without interfering. The owner, a tan-skinned woman in her 50s, sunglasses on, pearl necklace gleaming, observed. Then laughed. "You're really the engineer? I've been through plenty of mechanics and none found the issue that fast." Imani nodded gently. No boast. The woman leaned closer to Julian and whispered, "She deserves to be mentored, or, at the very least, fully trusted." Julian didn't respond. He just looked at Imani from a distance, not with the eyes of an investor, but as someone realizing he might be standing next to a woman his respect was slowly turning into something deeper. The phone rang. Julian's assistant rushed into the office, breath quick. "The board. Changed their schedule. They're arriving tomorrow morning." Julian shot to his feet. His eyes darted toward the glass garage attached to the penthouse. Imani was wiping her hands. Calm. Focused. Sunlight spilled through the glass, lighting her cheek. She looked up. Smiled at him. Slow motion. The white cloth folded neatly in her hands. That gaze. Steady. No hint of what was coming. Julian stood frozen, worry creeping across his face. She believed this was a place she was respected. He knew this was the very place that might betray that belief. What would you do if the person you most wanted to protect was standing right in the storm's path? Stay silent to shield them, or speak up and risk losing everything? The glass doors slid open. The click of leather shoes echoed in steady rhythm. Bradley Vaughn and Gregory Holt, two of the most powerful board members, walked in like they owned the room. Julian stood, just opened his mouth to greet them. Bradley raised a hand, cutting him off. "We don't have much time. Let's get straight to it." Julian froze. At that moment, Imani stepped out from the garage, her work shirt stained with grease, a cable still in her hand. She stopped when she saw them. Bradley glanced over, his eyes flat, mocking. Gregory looked at Julian, smirking. "Seems like the young CEO hires engineers by different standards these days." Imani heard it. Her expression didn't change, just a faint arch in her brow. No anger, but no step forward either. Julian looked at her, then back at them. For the first time, prejudice wasn't online. It was standing inside the very home he had built. The air froze for a few seconds after the remark. Bradley and Gregory waited, expecting Julian to say something. Imani looked at him, not with blame, but with a quiet hope that maybe, just this once, he wouldn't choose silence. Julian opened his mouth, then stopped. No words came out. He glanced at the board members. They stood firm, like two immovable walls. Imani took a soft breath. The hope left her eyes. She gave a small nod. "I see." She stepped back. "I thought you'd learned something." Her voice didn't rise. "But I guess you only learned how to stay silent better." She turned away, not waiting for a reply. Her silhouette faded behind the glass door, and Julian stood alone, between the world he belonged to and the one he had just let walk away. Imani folded her work shirt, slipped it into a canvas bag. No rush, no anger, no regret. Her tools were packed with precision, nothing forgotten, except the old pair of gloves left quietly on the steel table. She stepped out of the garage. Her figure slowly faded into the late afternoon light. Behind her, Julian's assistant called out, "Ms. Carter, you forgot these." He held up the gloves. Imani turned, didn't walk back. She looked at them for a second, then shook her head. "No need. Old gloves can't keep your hands clean." The words sliced through a thread neither side dared to name. She turned again and walked on. No more words. Sometimes, goodbye doesn't come with a slammed door, just a thing left behind, and someone who doesn't turn back. Julian sat still at his desk. Two windows glowed on his screen. One held an old photo, him and his ex, hands held, eyes once warm. The other, a recent picture of Imani beneath a hood, sunlight pouring through glass, grease staining her collar. He didn't close his eyes, but he was seeing everything, through the gaze of a man who just lost something real. His assistant approached, placing a phone on the table. "She just posted this." The screen displayed a simple, steady caption. "I don't need to be chosen. I need to be respected enough to say no." Julian read it, once, then again. No one spoke. No one had to criticize him, because sometimes the sharpest pain doesn't come from others. It's the moment you realize you had another chance, and you were the one who let it slip away. The boardroom was lit bright. 12 people sat around a massive wooden table. The company logo glowed on the screen behind Julian. Bradley began. As for the expansion strategy, we need a reaffirmation from the CEO on direction and how to maintain a professional image. Julian didn't reply right away. He stood, pulled a document from his briefcase, placed it on the table. "This is my letter of resignation." The room went still. Puzzled glances exchanged. Julian inhaled. "I can't lead if I have to stay silent to keep the seat." His eyes met each of theirs. "I choose to lose this chair so I can keep what's human in me." No applause, no argument, because sometimes truth doesn't need volume. Just one person brave enough to stand, even if it means walking away from the throne. Julian sped through the city streets, headlights trailing questions he hadn't answered. The first garage, dark, locked. He paused, hands tight on the wheel. The second, lit inside, tools clinked against the floor. A young mechanic with braided hair looked up. "Is Imani here?" The kid shook his head, then smiled faintly. "She stopped by this morning, left a message, in case someone came looking." Julian held his breath. The boy read aloud, slowly. She said, "If someone's looking for me, tell them I don't fix cars for people who see me as a tool." Julian said nothing, just nodded, small. Some words aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be understood, and carried quietly into the silence you built for yourself. Her father's old garage sat tucked in a narrow alley, dim light swinging from a low hook. Imani was bent over an old car, arms greasy, sweat darkening her collar. No words, just the sound of metal meeting metal. Julian stepped inside. He didn't call her name, didn't rush. He looked around. Everything was worn, but real, like her. He placed something on the wooden bench, a silver ring, shaped like a gear. The one she once said, "I wear it because it works without needing to shine." Imani looked up, not surprised, just waiting to hear what he'd say. Julian met her eyes. "I didn't come to ask you back." He took a breath. "I came because I can't bear to live wrong one more time." Short words, but real, and sometimes that's all it takes to begin again, if the other person is still listening. 3 months later, on the new glass doors, fresh paint spelled out, Carter and Westwood, Auto. The garage was wide, bright, modern, but warm. A row of sports cars lined the floor. Inside, 8 young apprentices, mostly people of color, gloves on, eyes lit with focus. Imani stepped out of the tech area, clipboard in hand. Her jacket still smelled of oil, but now her name and his were stitched on her chest. She stood before the group, voice calm and clear. "Here, we're not just learning how to fix cars. Don't learn to fix fast. Learn to see right." One student asked quietly, "See what, ma'am?" Imani smiled. "See people for who they are, not the surface they're wearing." Outside, Julian chatted with a client in a suit. Inside, something deeper was being repaired, how people see and how they are seen. Late afternoon, the garage was quiet. Imani wiped the whiteboard listing the new week's schedule. Julian walked in, didn't speak. He held out his hand. In his palm, a gear-shaped ring, older now but lightly coated in a clean, matte gray, as if rinsed through oil and honesty. Imani looked at it, said nothing. Julian smiled softly. "This time, I chose right, before I got pushed into choosing wrong." She took it, turned it in the light. A small stone embedded, not flashy, but real. Imani slid it on, a perfect fit. She frowned playfully. "Hope it doesn't rust like the last one." Julian laughed. She did too, quiet, but full. Sometimes there's no need for candles or kneeling, just the right person, at the right time. The apprentices headed home one by one. The air still held the scent of engines and dreams. Imani stood beside Julian. Their hands brushed, not clasped. No big gesture, but nothing needed explaining. They had made it. From doubt to trust. From division to standing on the same side. She looked toward the door that had just closed. He looked at her. No words. They had both once been measured by someone else's eyes, but now they chose how they would be seen. Not by appearance, but by worth. To every woman who's ever been told she's too much or not enough, you don't need to be chosen. You deserve the right to say no. Have you ever been misjudged because of your skin, your gender, or where you come from? Share your story. If you believe these voices deserve to be heard, share this. And subscribe to keep going with us.